Great, and we're live. So welcome everybody to this remote interview. My name is Lisette, and I'm interviewing people and companies doing great things remotely. Today on the line, something different than what I normally have. I have Elizabeth Weinstein from San Jose, and Elizabeth, you run EPW Small Business Law. So I'm very excited about this. We're going to dive into it. It says, I found online, you work with international clients who start their own businesses, often online. So that's one thing. And you encourage your company, your law firm actively encourages a remote working culture. Those were the things that I found online. So I definitely want to dive into that with you. But let's start with the first question, which is, what does your virtual office look like? What do you need to get your work done?
Right. Yeah. So I personally work from home most of the time, and my office actually right now is in my bedroom, and which isn't exactly what I would optimally want, but that's just how it is set up right now. So I have two monitors. That for me is, I would go insane if I didn't have two monitors for doing most of my work. So I have an iMac, and then I have another super cheap $100 monitor that I got to put the other things on. Because for me, when I do a lot of my work is drafting contracts and things like that, where I need to have a lot of things open at one time. So, and I know a lot of people in other kinds of businesses need that too. They have to have a lot of documents open at one time, because I'm drafting something over here and I need to have a whole bunch of other windows open over here as references. So for me, that's a big issue. And then I'll have a whole bunch of things on my desk right in front of me, other reference materials, notes from clients. I'm also a very analog person too. So, I mean, like I have a notebook here in front of me. And to-do lists that are analog. So I'm a big combination person. So we keep, and that's a big thing that's kind of interesting, where while I do, and we'll talk more about this, while we do a ton of the business is run online and we have all these apps and all that we use, personally, I actually do keep a lot of my notes and to-do lists on pieces of paper, but then I scan things and load them up so everyone else can see it too. So I have a big combination of things, because I'm I like things to be touch and physical. It really works for me to take notes that way. I also, though, do have a laptop, which is what I'm doing this on. And I use that when I'm working in Starbucks or I'm traveling or whatever. Just a little MacBook that's super lightweight. Because a lot of times I will be working from a waiting room while my kid is doing something, or I'll be traveling on a road trip and checking email, something that I can't respond to on my phone. So I need to have a nice, easy to use, lightweight laptop, and that's what I use.
Okay, sounds like a good setup. I too have multiple monitors, and I also have the notebook, which I showed you, in a whole set of markers. And I really like I like the combination of the analog and digital world. I think it's important, and people forget a lot when we go online that it doesn't all have to be online. There is a happy medium for everybody. So let's dive into EPW Small Business Law. I'm really interested in this because there's a lot of legal issues, I'm assuming, related to remote working, starting your own business, hiring people in other countries. I'm not exactly sure what we'll run into, but let's start with the description of what do you do and why did you start this business, this law firm?
Yeah, so EPW Small Business Law, it's first it's easy to think about it from the perspective of what do we not do. So I don't do any litigation. So that kind of helps to understand a little bit about what do we not do. And I don't have a physical office. I don't have to appear in court. So that makes it possible for me to do my work remotely. So what I do for my clients is I form companies, I draft contracts, I do trademark work, I give people advice about copyrights, help them negotiate licenses, help them, a lot of negotiation work. So in a lot of ways, a lot of the stuff I do helps them not have litigation happen some way, some far away place in the future. And that's one of the reasons I enjoy doing it. And while I got into this, I mean, obviously I'm a lawyer and I've been a lawyer for a long time. And the reason I particularly decided to do this firm was because I had so many small business owner friends and colleagues, and they kept asking me for this particular advice. And I was like, well, I don't really necessarily want to do this. I'm doing these other things. And at a certain point, you have to stop ignoring that. And part of it was because I wanted to figure out a way to package this to fit the life that I wanted, because I didn't want to just charge by hour. I didn't want to do litigation. I wanted to be able to work remote. And I had to figure out how to make a law firm that could do that.
Is it pretty unusual for law firms?
Yeah, I mean, it is. And I mean, it's becoming more common now, but, even in 2012, when I started this particular practice, it was very uncommon. And, even now I have lawyers who will email me and be like, how do you do this? And, it's a little bit more common now, but then it was very bizarre. Like when other lawyers saw this, they were surprised that someone could package things flat fee or package things. So pretty much how I do things either flat fee or on an annual retainer. And there are other law firms who are doing that now, even big giant law firms who have Fortune 50 clients who are doing this kind of stuff. It's a little bit more secret, but they don't advertise that. But that is a lot of times how they're charging their clients, is on annual retainers, even for litigation, which is amazing to think about. But because the clients love that. It's almost kind of like insurance in a way. It's much easier to budget if you just have a flat fee than having these crazy random hourly rates.
Well, and also charging by the hour feels old fashioned in a way. It's almost like you want to charge for value that you get. So whether it takes an hour or whether it takes 10 hours, maybe the value is $500. So yeah. And there's this one thing I really dislike about hourly billing is there's this disincentive to talk to your lawyer. Like, you want to have a relationship. You want to be able to prevent problems. So if you are having a problem, my client's having a problem, I want them to come to me when it's this tiny little problem, and I want them to send me an email and say, hey, there's this issue going on with this client or with my business partner or with my employee, whatever. Because I can solve it now with just a little thing. If you wait till it's a huge problem, it's going to be this huge extravaganza. And that's when litigation happens, is when it becomes this huge problem. And I think that with the hourly billing, people are going to be afraid of, well, I'm going to get charged for, 15 minutes for my lawyer to answer this little tiny email. So there's this disincentive to ask for advice. So it's real archaic way to get counseling from your lawyer. So I just didn't like doing business that way. So that was one of the big things I had to kind of figure out how to create a business model that worked for me. And I also just wanted to be able to work from home and have the kind of life that I wanted. Why did you want to work from home? What was the driver for that?
Yeah, so one of the big reasons is because I have a kid and wanted to homeschool. And so I was creating the job that I wanted to have. And so trying to find the job wasn't going to work. And so I had to create a business where I could have that job. Was really one of the big things that I did.
Okay. And do you find, so I'm not sure if I think I may have gotten this from your assistant who emailed me, but it says you work with international clients who start their own businesses, often online. Mm-hmm. So are you seeing that more and more, online businesses being started?
Yeah. I mean, I have a lot of clients who are starting businesses that, they could be consulting businesses, selling products where they're importing products from other countries. They're selling information products like ebooks or courses, or they're taking a business that used to just be in person or a storefront, and then they're taking that as an online business. They're almost launching a second business in a lot of ways. Sometimes it actually is a second business, and we'll incorporate it separately. And I have clients who are international clients, like they're physically located in another country, but they're actually forming their business here in the United States because all their clients are here in the United States. Maybe they're a U.S. citizen, maybe they're not, but they just find that their clients are here. So that's, one of the issues, though, if when you're doing an online business, is it kind of creates this weird problem legally, because it's like, where is your business located?
Right.
It's nowhere. It's like,
Right.
and so the law doesn't know what to do with you, the law is really unsettled with that, and especially some of my clients who are real nomads. They don't actually live anywhere. And so we have to figure out, well, you kind of have to live somewhere. We have to like write that down something. So we have to kind of figure out where we're going to pick to be your place that you live. And we have to do all these kind of odd things. So it creates these strange problems to solve.
So I assume that the law will eventually catch up to this. Maybe it's just that the world is moving too fast. Is that an okay assumption?
Well, yeah, the law is really slow. And the thing is, the law in the United States, and this is true in a lot of countries, but especially in the United States, is very, very fragmented, because so you have the federal laws is the law of the United States, where it's made in Washington, D.C., right? And then each state has its own law. So California and Maine and, every single state has its own law. And so a lot of times you have to actually look at, and then some cities have their own laws that may apply to you. So San Francisco has a law. New York City has a law about certain things. Or it's not a law, it's an ordinance or something of that nature. It's called something different. And so each one of those different jurisdictions may or may not apply to you, and they all move at different speeds. And actually, the smaller the jurisdiction sometimes will move a little bit faster, depending upon how modern that particular place is. San Francisco typically moves pretty fast. New York typically moves pretty fast. Really small towns usually don't move fast unless there's one person, because one person in a small town can do a whole lot, right? And then states that are very progressive tend to move very fast on things, but other states that aren't will move very slow. So, and the federal government takes a long time typically to do anything. So because it just is a long process.
And this whole digital nomad movement must just be, people must be just moving in between the law here, I'm assuming, because if you don't have a physical location, yet you are doing work. My clients, I have to say, my clients are all over the world. Mm-hmm. And the fact that I'm located in the Netherlands is completely random. And I hope nobody from the Dutch visa government is actually listening to my podcast. But, because when I first applied for my visa, I had to say that I had clients here, and I did. It was honest. But then after a while, the clients started spreading to all over the world. And now it's everywhere. And the fact that I'm here is simply by choice. I choose to be here.
Right.
So, and
it creates this weird problem, and because you, in a way, like you're doing business and you're sort of doing business in all these different places, but are you actually? Because, like, let's say you're doing consulting work over the phone. Like, did you really do it in? Like, let's say you had a consulting client in Nevada. Did you actually do consulting in Nevada? We didn't go there. So then you'd have to look at Nevada's statutes and cases. And, well, some states would say, yes, you did. Some states would say, no, you didn't. I actually don't know Nevada's rules off the top of my head. And it's one of those things, but it is not clear. It's not like there's one rule that every place does it.
Right.
And so and they also change all the time, because that's every time a case comes out, it'll interpret something differently. And so a lot of times we're just doing risk management. And we're saying, okay, how much risk are you willing to take? Where do we want to draw the line? We'll make our best guess on how we want to do things, and also look at what's the likelihood you're going to come back to the United States. Where do you think you would want to go if you did? And so we'll think about that too. Because I have some clients who are like, yeah, I'm going to eventually come back. And if I come back, I'm going to go here most likely. And versus clients who are not planning to ever come back, and we'll make different decisions based upon that. So yeah, I think one of the difficult things is that there's very little clarity. There's very little very few times where I can say, yes, this is exactly what you should do, or no, it's exactly what you shouldn't do. Most of the times we're kind of making our best guess as opposed to yes, no answer.
Super interesting. So what would you advise? I know this is going to be a big question, but we can approach it from any angle, but what were the very basics that people should know before starting a business that's going to be doing a lot of work online? What are the things that people have to think about when they come to you, or that you advise people to think about?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if you're going to be doing work online, and I mean, it depends on the kind of things that you're going to be doing. If you're going to be selling services versus selling products, and what kind of price points you're going to have. And if people are going to be actually purchasing directly from your website versus if they're going to be just like kind of making the first introductions off your website, and then you're going to be selling to them somewhere else. So if they're going to be purchasing directly off your website, you want to make sure that they agree to some kind of terms and conditions right when they're making the sale. So if you look on, Amazon or Zappos' website or something, you'll see when you buy from Amazon, it says by purchasing this or by putting this in your cart, you agree to these terms and conditions. Right. You want to make sure that if you have some terms like your return policy or whatever it is, you actually are having them agree to that. Otherwise, if it's just like down your footer somewhere, they're not really agreeing to those terms because they're not aware of them. No one looks at the footer. I mean, it's there on the website, but no one's looking at it. So you want to make sure that it's somewhere by where they put it in their card or hit the agreement button. And if they're buying services that are relatively high price point, you can think about actually having them sign a contract that is even an online contract. So they can use Adobe Sign or Write Signature, one of these online signatures. Those are just as binding in almost every jurisdiction, major jurisdiction, having a digital signature. So those are a great way to have people sign a real contract. And I think if you're having a contract that's a relatively high price point, it makes sense to do. So you also want to make sure you have a privacy policy on your website. So it's going to be required in the United States and Canada and the EU, in most places. And what the requirements are depends on where you are and where your people are. So exactly what needs to go in it would depend, but you're going to need something is the short answer to that. And then thinking about, and as far as, do you need to be a corporation or an LLC or all this kind of stuff, it really depends on where you are and where your clients are and how much money you're making. So it's very case by case basis. There's some people who you'll see all these articles online. They'll say, you have to be a corporation or LLC or whatever. It really depends. There's some people who have a very small business that doesn't make a huge amount of money, or they're in a jurisdiction, they're in a country where forming a corporation is a horribly big deal. Right. And it doesn't make sense to do. Here in the United States and a lot of states, it's a relatively simple process, and it can make a lot of sense to do. So it just depends on the situation. So it really is a case-by-case basis.
Right. It does seem like it's good that people think through these things, though, before they get into it. Because if you just go and get started without any sort of advice, so really the advice is call Elizabeth before you start this and think through some of these things. No, it's good to be educated. I mean, I have to say, when I first moved to the Netherlands, I didn't know what I was getting into. And I was really lucky that I had the sense to contact an expat lawyer to walk me through the process. Because yes, you can navigate this stuff yourself, but it sure is easier when somebody knows the ropes and can give you the right things to think about. I mean, it saves a lot of people.
Yeah, and I think especially in that kind of a case, like I've had clients who are in various European countries, and that's a case where having a lawyer local in your jurisdiction, in Netherlands, in Sweden, France, whatever it is, because I'm thinking of clients for specific countries, you need someone local to you there who knows how that works, because it is very different than the United States and it's complicated. Right. And you need to make sure you don't mess up your visa, because that would be very bad. And you need to make sure that you're not going to mess up tax situations. There's a lot of details. So you wouldn't want to accidentally do something that's going to sabotage what you have going on.
Yeah, it turns out that governments take borders very seriously. Yeah. And countries take things very seriously. So you can't just Can't just roll in and do what you want because
just because it's online doesn't mean you're not doing business. Doesn't mean you're not working. And the same thing with the United States, especially now. You know, if you are from another country and you're here in the United States and you have an online business, you need to really think about, talk to your immigration attorney here in the United States about, you know, if you're here just on a tourist visa, but you're still running your online business, you need to talk to your lawyer, your immigration attorney about that. And I'm not an immigration attorney. I just know to send people to one.
Right.
That's, you know, because it is a whole entire issue and you need to make sure it's being addressed.
So I want to talk a little bit about your company in particular and how you guys work internally, because I heard that you have people, well, you actively encourage remote working culture. So I assume you have people all over the United States, maybe all over the world. How is it that you guys work together? How big is it? How many people are working with you?
Yeah, so right now we have 3 people, including myself.
Okay.
And so Erica and Katie, they actually travel. Right now both of them right now are in Colorado, but they will, and I'm trying to think, I'm like, where are they right now? We actually have a calendar in a Google Calendar that says where everyone's going to be at any particular time, and you have to put in there where are you going to be, so we make sure with time zones, because each person typically will travel and be working in different parts of the world, and so we have many times where the 3 of us are on different continents, and Katie had spent months, maybe actually she might have been a whole year in South America, and she's actually going back to South America again. Erica spends a couple of months every year in France and has traveled to India, and so it's very typical where we're doing our weekly calls, business calls by video from 3 different continents. And my rule is pretty much if you can get the work done and you can figure out how to get high-speed internet access, it doesn't really matter where you're physically located. It's just a matter of being able to get the work done.
So what's hard for you guys then? What's pretty challenging for the way that you're working?
I think the challenge can be for everyone is if you get somewhere and then the internet doesn't work.
Yeah.
And we've all had that, you know, and I haven't had that because I don't travel right now internationally, but I've traveled domestically and still had this problem. In October, I went on a road trip and the hotel said, we have Wi-Fi, and I went there and it was one satellite connection for the entire hotel.
Right.
And I couldn't even get my email to download. So I couldn't get, and I had planned that I was going to be able to work an hour or 2 every day. And so I had to use my phone to send, I mean, I could only use my phone on, and I had to like drive down like some crazy road to use my phone. And that was it. Right. You know, and we've all had that where you're promised the Airbnb or you're promised something is going to work and then it doesn't. So I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges. And I think remembering that when you're doing travel, especially international travel, or a big road trip drive or whatever it is, you have to factor in that after you've traveled for 14 hours on a flight or whatever it is, you're probably not going to be able to work right then.
You're not going to be real fresh, probably.
Yeah, exactly. And you may think, oh, I'm not going to do a full days of work right after that second. So being realistic about what you can do, because we can all be overly optimistic ourselves about how intense we can put in of a day's work, but sometimes that's not being real. So that could be a challenge.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. I mean, you think, oh, I'm just sitting on the plane. It's not like I'm doing anything so strenuous, but still, I mean, I have to, after I fly somewhere, I'm totally cracked out. Like I'm not doing my best work after a long flight, especially with jet lag and these things. Yeah, indeed. And what kind of communication tools do you guys use?
Yeah, we have a lot of things that we use. I think right now, one of the biggest things is we use Slack. We found that we were drowning in email, and we use Google Docs and all Google apps for our email and what have you. but we were just had way too many email threads. So we started using Slack, and we were aware of Slack for a long time. And we were like, I don't understand what that is for a long time. But then finally started using it. And now it's just completely changed how our internal communications work. So that's been wonderful. And hardly ever use email anymore internally. Another thing that we just started using relatively recently is Airtable.
Oh, yeah.
And that's been great. Like, we have one that maintains our client database. And then I actually just started one a couple of weeks ago where I'm using it now to track actually both the opportunities and all my client projects. It's really the workflow of everything coming in. And so it's actually really nice because then everybody can see the workflow of everything, both all the opportunities and the actual projects that we're working on. One of the interesting things that I found was a lot of the, Salesforce and all those kind of things out there track opportunities and projects separately, and you can't see them all together. But I've always found that didn't work because I actually need to be able to see them all in a line and be able to see, okay, if we take this opportunity, that means that it's like, I need to be able to see how much work that's going to be.
Right.
So because one of the things that happens is I'll send out, contracts to people or quotes to people. Well, if all 7 of these people say yes to these quotes, and we already have 10 projects, it's like, oh my gosh, we're going to have a lot of work to do. So it needs to be all in a line. So that's one of the neat things about Airtable is you're kind of creating your own customized program. So, because everything out there didn't work for us. And so that's been really neat to be able to kind of create our own applications in a way.
I have a colleague who's completely addicted to Airtable. I think he's connected his whole life in different tables, and
it's really neat. Yeah, it's like my new thing now.
Yeah, if you're a spreadsheet junkie out there, do not start with Airtable. We will not see you again.
Yeah, because it's a relational database. So it's like that. So for me, it's like this thing. I was like, oh, this is so amazing. So yeah, everything's color coded. Yeah, if you're one of those people,
then dive in. Mm-hmm. So we're nearing the end of the time, but I have a couple of questions I've just got to ask. So you're working from home, and I'd love to ask about your productivity tips. Like, is there a typical day? How do you keep from getting lonely working at home, and how do you stay motivated?
Mm-hmm. Is there a typical day? Like, I think each Monday through Friday isn't like each day is typical, but I do have like a Monday routine, a Tuesday routine, a Wednesday routine. Like that is more like how my days work. And so what I typically do is each day, or actually the day before, like the night before, I sit down and I write down 3 or 4, depending upon the day, my highest priority things for that day. So if I have an appointment or an interview like this or whatever, it goes as one of those 3 things. And then I pick like a project or something like that for a client or whatever it is to write down as things on there. And I find that's really important because otherwise I'll look at my to-do list and I just have no direction and nothing ends up happening. And so then I can sit down and like, okay, here's my 3 things or here's my 4 things, depending upon how many personal life stuff I have on that day. And then I'm much more focused for that day. So that's one of my big routine things. And then I typically also do kind of the same things for my personal life is I'll pick 1 or 2 or 3 personal to-dos to do, it could be going to Target or whatever it is, errands to run, that kind of stuff. And then I go through those things. And so some days I have client calls, some days I don't. Some days I focus on client work, some days I focus on marketing work. It's like each day I have a different thing that I focus on.
Okay. Oh, it's It's really handy. I've heard in some of the business podcasts I listen to that people often give themselves a CEO day. So there's a day where you're just focused on the overall strategy of the business, and so so that because if you own your own company, you have to do everything, right? The marketing, the business development, the everything on your own, and so you have to allocate a little bit of time every week for each of those buckets that go into that.
Yeah, like I have Monday is a big CEO admin kind of day. So that's when I have my meeting with Erica, my manager. And so that's a day. And I also do a weekly report. That's where I look at all the numbers for the business and look at our productivity and all these kind of things and do analysis in the business. And that doesn't take very long because I have such a process going on. It only takes me like 10 minutes to do. And I think it's really important to look at your numbers every day, every week, so you know exactly what's going on. I actually do that in my personal life too. So I know exactly what's happening in the business, even if it's not good. I want to know exactly what the good news is, the bad news is, whatever, because then you can actually do something about it before anything actually bad happens. And I also look at the workflow too, and the workflow also looks at, did I send out quotes to prospects who haven't gotten back to me? Because then I can look at it and be like, hey, I sent this out to you 3 weeks ago. And a lot of times people are just procrastinating. So it keeps the sales process moving forward. And as well as the client where I sent out something saying, hey, you need to give me this information so I can finish your work, because they're also procrastinating too, so I can get their work done. And then I have another day on Friday. I have this 11 a.m. appointment with myself to work on strategic projects. And so these are like long-term projects or marketing projects, things that don't exactly have a deadline. And they tend to be things that weren't getting done, where I was the bottleneck. And so this has been really, really helpful to set aside time on my calendar where I'm going to be working on something that's for the long-term growth of the business. And even if I just spend that 30 minutes or hour working on it, it makes a gigantic difference if I'm doing it every single week.
Yeah, it's amazing what we can get done in a small amount of time. I've been working on a book, and some days I only have 30 minutes to work on the book, but I take the 30 minutes and, over a week, that 30 minutes adds up if you're doing something. So yeah, indeed. So there's 2 questions, well, 3, but one's really easy, but one's really hard. And this seems to come up with freelancers and people who have online businesses a lot. And I know there's not just one answer, but what do you do when clients don't pay? I know this is country specific, but every freelancer, myself included, and business owners in general, you're going to run into clients who just don't pay. Instead, besides just calling Elizabeth for advice, where else would you start for people when this situation arises? I'm sure you've heard it before.
Yeah. I mean, part of it is something to, if a client isn't paying, it is a place to make you aware of there's something that went wrong with that process. And yes, you need to deal with this particular client that didn't pay, but it's also a lesson to make you aware of something probably went wrong way far a long time ago. Occasionally there's just a client who something, flaked out on their side or whatever, but usually something else went wrong. It may be something fundamentally that could be changed in the way you collect money, in the way your contracts are written, in your screening process with your clients. Like that is one of the things that I eventually look at with my clients when they're having these problems. First we'll look at sending them a demand letter and trying to actually collect the money. And typically that's what we'll do is we'll, send them demand letter and try to negotiate. Probably won't get all of it, but get some of it. Depends on where they are. Depends what if they're local to them, if we if we have a written contract, how easy it will actually be to collect. If we think they actually have any money, because sometimes they don't. And that's one of the issues too. Sometimes they disappeared. I mean, sometimes there's no money to be gotten. But then we also learn as a lesson of, okay, what was wrong with this process such that this client thought they didn't need to pay? And we go back and look, okay, did you take a deposit? Did you have a written contract? Did you have some kind of place where they, in the contract, where they had to make payments along the way according to deliverables? I like to have with consultants, for example, where they have to make progress payments according to certain milestones, for example, so that where their last payment is only the last 10%. And if they flake, that's not good, but
you're not losing 100%.
Yeah, you're only losing out on a percent. You can also tie the turnover of intellectual property based on them making all the payments. So let's say you're a web designer or a graphic designer. They don't get that website unless they pay you all the money. Some clients won't agree to this, but you know, it depends on the power between you and your client. But you can tie the intellectual properties such that they don't get the ownership of anything until they pay all the money, which in a way is logical. You don't get a car until you pay all the money, you know. So that's one way you can go about structuring it. So sometimes you can get the money if someone actually has it and you have enough leverage to get it, or you can at least get some percentage of the money. But sometimes you end up using it as a life lesson to go back and fix your process.
Yeah.
So it doesn't happen again.
I've had a few life lessons where you think, I'm going to just have an extra cognac tonight and then I'm going to forget about it and just leave it in my past. Like sometimes you just have to leave it in the past. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes you go back and look and you realize, you know, I kind of knew I shouldn't have taken that client. And you know, sometimes it was the client where you had a bad feeling in your gut. You kind of knew it wasn't a good fit, but you took them anyway because you kind of needed the money or whatever it was. I mean, so sometimes it is a screening issue with the clients that you take, and you knew it, you know. So that's part of it too. Some clients aren't actually worth it. And it's hard to get to that point. That's something that you get just by being in business for a long time.
Yeah, you get that spider sense, and then you learn to listen to it, because sometimes you have the spider sense, I didn't listen.
And we all have that over and over again.
For sure. Yeah. Part of being alive. Mm-hmm. So very last question, which is an easy one, I hope, which is, if people want to get in touch with you, what is the best way to do that? What are the avenues that work best for you?
Sure. So my website, they can go to elizabethpw.com, and then they don't have to remember how to spell my name or anything. And that goes to my website. They can also find me on Twitter at ElizabethPW. And those are the best ways to find me directly. And or they can send me an email, elizabeth@elizabethpw.com.
Okay, that's pretty easy to remember, pretty consistent across all social medias. And I loved on your website, I actually sent a page, I think, to a friend of mine, because it was a perfect description of what you were looking for, like who should contact you, and who should not contact you. And I thought that was a brilliant page for really describing the people that should. No, you don't do litigation, for example. So if you're looking for litigation, you don't call Elizabeth. But if you are looking for contracts and trademarks and copyrights and negotiation, then you do want people to call you. So I just wanted to acknowledge that page was really brilliant. I think it's clearly outlined.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think that's important for everyone to always remember. Like, it's very good to spell out who is a good fit for you and who isn't, because it just saves everybody a lot of time. You know, if there's certain people who are not good fit, like another thing I say on my page is, if you want a lawyer who like wears a fancy suit, and if you want a lawyer who's like one of these attack dog lawyers, I am not that lawyer. So like I'm not the right person for you. There are lawyers who are totally like that, and you should go hire one of them.
Right.
You know, so it's important to disclose that, because it just wastes people's time if you try to be something that you're not.
Right. And good to remember that. I've had some offers from banks here that wanted me to come in and do consulting services. And I say, I don't do that. I do the workshop. That's what I do. I don't do consulting services. So I've been very clear about, also, even though they offer so much money, it made my eyes pop out. I was like, oh my God, are you sure you don't do that? Even in the face of a lot of money. I've been very clear on the business plan. I think that's really good advice for freelancers and people who run businesses, is also be very focused. Yeah. Who is your client?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for all the time that you took today. I could go on and on. I mean, there's so many legal topics related to remote work and international teams. I'm sure we could definitely go on and on about that. Any last parting advice for people? I mean, you've given a lot of advice already, but any last parting advice besides call Elizabeth for all your you're starting?
Yeah, I mean, my biggest piece of advice to people is, especially if you're working with people on for providing services, is really just to have a written agreement. That, and not just because of where you think you're going to sue them or whatever, but just because it makes misunderstandings much less likely. If you have a written agreement, then you actually will remember what you agreed to, and they'll remember what you agreed to because it's written down. And that's true in your personal life, and that's true in your business life too.
Do emails count as a contract? Does that depend on the location?
Yeah, it really, the issue is that an email is not, it may or may not be really mutual, because it's like, I wrote the email, and did you agree to that exact email that I wrote? That can be the issue. So it depends on what you emailed back. Did you email back, yes, I agree to that exact thing? Or did you email back some other things? Right. So it depends on the context. So it could be better to have something that is, like, you can make just a quick little doc. It doesn't have to be written by a lawyer necessarily. I mean, obviously, if you have a lawyer write it up, it can be have a bunch of legal language into it that has all the T's crossed and the I's dotted. But if you have something drafted and you can have it be electronic signatures, then this is the thing we actually agreed to. That's what the emails can be hard to be like, what was our agreement? I don't know, because we never had one email that was like both sides said yes to. That's what the emails can be a problem.
And also finding that email again.
Yeah. You go back into the Google thread and it's like, wait, that was 103 emails.
Line. Yeah. From 3 years ago. Yeah.
That's where people get in trouble.
Indeed. Well, great advice, people. I hope, let me know if people come to you from Collaboration Superpowers. And if you go to Elizabeth, make sure you tell her that we sent you. It's always fun to just see where things cross in the world and where things come from. So thanks so much today, Elizabeth, for your time. And until next time, everybody, be powerful.